A dash of mystery, a sparkle of magic, and all things cozy. Join your host, Elle Hartford, for Cozy Alchemy, a proud member of the Authors on the Air network. Hello and welcome to Cozy Alchemy, the podcast all about cozy, legendary books. I'm Elle Hartford, and my host today is Travis Baldree, author of Legends and Lattes, and several other books, which we will get to in just a minute. But first, Travis is going to start us off with a game of two truths and a lie.
Two truths and a lie. I have a background in software engineering and have done that more than anything else in my entire life. I find writing books a lot easier than narrating books. And my favorite book of all time is Nicobobinus by Terry Jones.
Oh, okay. And all right, so the background information that I have is that I do know that you narrate books. Like, I know that that is true. I don't know, of course, if you find that easier or harder, but I'm sure we'll get into that later. Software engineer sounds familiar. I may have read that while researching. So I'm going to guess that number 3 is the lie.
Incorrect.
Ah.
It's actually number 2.
Oh, okay.
Nicobobinus is, I think, my favorite book of all time.
Nice.
By Terry Jones from Monty Python, actually.
Classic. Got it. Very cool. Very cool. Okay, so that means narrating is easier than writing the book, right?
Infinitely easier than writing a book.
Okay. That makes sense. You can follow what's already written on the page, I suppose.
You don't have to drag it up out of the mud. There's no question about whether this is the right scene or what's going to come next. You can sit down and do the work, and it has its challenges, but those challenges only take a certain amount of time.
Fair. Got it. Okay. And like I said, I know I had that on my list to ask you about later, just narrating books in general and what it's like to narrate your own. But before we get to all that, so you have 2 books out, right? You have Legends and Lattes, of course, and then Bookshops and Bone Dust, and then one upcoming book, Brigands and Breadknives.
That's right.
And how would you explain them to somebody who's hearing about them for the first time?
They're all what's broadly termed cozy fantasy, which is generally, I think, fantasy novels that leave you feeling a little better after you read them, and that are more concerned with using fantasy to talk about everyday and relatable things that maybe we all encounter, as opposed to talking about saving the world or rescuing someone from a dragon or defeating an evil overlord. Maybe those things happen, right, but those would not be really the focus of the book. So I think that's how probably I would define it.
Okay. Yeah, well, and very apropos, because Legends and Lattes especially is often the book that people point out to as kind of kicking off the popularity of the cozy fantasy genre, which is so cool. I know that when I'm explaining the genre to people, will reference it and be like, you might have heard of Legends and Lattes.
I think it ends up being a really lucky, for me, way for people to just refer to the genre. I mean, I think it's existed for a really long time, but it's very straightforward to point to that book, that title, and that cover and say, oh, here's an example. And
exactly.
People have an immediate idea and picture and can say, okay, I get what you're talking about.
Exactly. Yeah, it's a easy touchstone, and exactly. Relevant and recent one. Okay, so what inspired you to write it?
It actually started as a bit of a joke. It was in the middle of COVID, and I am still effectively a full-time narrator, and I read a lot of the same kind of stuff, which is usually pretty high stakes, save the world, progression fantasy or lit RPG. That's the genre that I'm best known for, so that's pretty much my reading diet. But It's not really what I wanted at the time. What I really wanted was, and the joke was, I wanted a Hallmark movie set in the Forgotten Realms. I just wanted something where I'd be okay at the end,
Yeah.
and I knew how to pronounce everyone's names, and that ultimately, like a chicken soup kind of book, felt nice afterward. Um, and theoretically, I thought that's what I was going to write, and then it ended up being a little less Hallmark and a little more real than I thought it would be. There's not really a nod and a wink to the camera, and everybody isn't wearing sweaters and saving the Christmas tree farm. But that's how it started. And I wrote it for National Novel Writing Month in 2021, and I did not expect anything that came after that.
And we will get to that in a minute. But first, I love what you brought up, like that the book ended up being more real than you expected. Can you talk a little more about that? What happened there?
Well, it wasn't. So I fully outlined the book. It was the only way I got it written. In fact, apparently that was the secret sauce for me to finish writing something. But until I was about halfway through actually writing it from the outline, I didn't realize that it was basically just me. I was a software developer, a game developer into my 40s. I did it for decades. I was good at it, but I didn't want to do it anymore. So I retired and moved to a new town and became an audiobook narrator, and then discovered this community of book and audiobook narrators that I didn't know existed, and ended up being really kind of essential to me. So I wrote a book about someone who did the same job into her 40s. She was good at it, but she didn't want to do it anymore. She moved to a new town, started a new job, and finds this whole community that's really
Classic
important and
cozy
vital for her.
Yeah.
But I didn't understand that was happening until I was halfway through writing the book. And similar things have happened with every other book. They almost always, well, so far, they'll always get infused with whatever is preoccupying me or is my personal thought or struggle or interest at the moment. So just can't seem to help it.
No, and that's something that's come up on the podcast before. And an aspect of cozy fantasy and just writing in general that I personally really love is this fact that, the things that we are working through ourselves often show up on the page, and it can be sort of a healing process, right?
I think it's a lot of the value of the genre is that you use fantasy to remind yourself that mundane things are important, that the things we all deal with are important. Good things, bad things, the sort of struggles we have are shared. We all run into a lot of the same sorts of milestones in our lives where we struggle with a specific sort of problem. And then the things we like, coffee, a good book, or whatever, these are all really mundane things, but they're also things that are great, that so many of us enjoy, that make our lives better, that make our lives more enjoyable, and that make it possible to get through the challenges that we get through daily. So I think that's just one of the cool things about the genre.
Absolutely. And I like that idea that, that the mundane things can be just as important as potentially, toppling the evil overlord or whatever else it may be.
It's never going to happen to me. I can't really relate to that at all. Not a lot of evil overlords. There's only a couple of them, and I'm probably not in a position to do anything about it. But, moving to a new town and starting a new business, or figuring out how to say no to someone that I really care about and disappoint them, or figuring out how to take a bunch of mistakes that I've made and look at them in a new light and, appreciate that maybe they were actually the fertile ground that some later success came from. These are all things that we all go through at some point. And as a result, what's more relatable than that?
Yeah, 100%. That's very true. Well, and on that note, you kind of mentioned that you feel like cozy fantasy is a genre that, has been around for a long time, even though we maybe haven't always recognized it as such. Can you talk a little more about that? Where do you feel the roots are?
I mean, I could probably go really far back, but if you weren't just an early example, The Hobbit feels like cozy fantasy to me. He just wants to stay home. He's really interested in eating. He goes on a journey with a lot of singing and more food. He's unconscious for the entire final battle, and then he wakes up and he gets to go back home.
Fair.
I think that 70% of Studio Ghibli movies are basically cozy fantasy, and the others are just emotionally devastating. And things like Diana Wynne Jones' work. I think that Brian Jake's Redwall series in a lot of ways is cozy fantasy. I think it's always existed. We just haven't thought of it as its own subgenre, really.
Is it a genre that you feel strongly about? Like, uh,
Um, I have appreciated the opportunity to be writing in it and to be associated with it, um, and I enjoy writing about connecting to other people. And the act of
mm,
writing itself is a really connective thing. So I think so much that I appreciate about it. I don't only want to write cozy fantasy, and I certainly don't want to be the person who writes about small business ownership in a fantasy world for the rest of my life. And I've already pressed outside of that as quickly as I can. And the book I'm working on right now is not cozy fantasy, but um, I enjoy the genre, and I enjoy it most when it feels real. When it
mm,
feels, I think there's this fine line between being saccharine and twee, and having it
mm.
feel like relatable enough that that feels like honest and something that I want to connect with. I was thinking about this a few days ago, and one of the things I like about cozy fantasy is like when I was a kid and I read a fantasy novel, it's like I could imagine myself. That's me. Like I opened the wardrobe, or I went around the corner, or I ended up in the fantasy realm, and it felt like it was possible.
Mm-hmm.
But the older I get, the less possible it feels. There's nothing behind
Mm.
that wardrobe. There's nothing around that corner. One of the things I like about cozy fantasy is that because it makes the fantasy less far away. I don't have to travel as far to get to it. And so it's easier for me to believe I can get there. And that sounds maybe a little silly, but like it doesn't.
No.
You only have to squint a little bit at Legends and Lattes to imagine, yeah, I could find some people and maybe we cosplay a little bit or we do D&D on the weekends, but we open a
Yeah.
coffee shop and this is, the experience I could have is actually not that far from this. That feels attainable to me in some respect. And I think there's something nice about that. I think it reclaims some of that feeling I had when I was a kid where the impossible felt possible. And I like that.
Yes, I think that's wonderful. And it doesn't sound silly to me, but then again, I exist in this cozy space. So you're probably preaching to the choir. And on that note, I'd like to take us on a slight detour if I could. Because the previous interview that I just did was obviously also in the cozy genre, but on the mystery side. We've got
Hmm.
cozy mystery as kind of a companion to cozy fantasy.
Hmm.
And she was making a very similar point, right? That sometimes cozy genres in general can become kind of saccharine or fluff was the word that she
Hmm.
used, right? Um, and she kind of combated that by incorporating present day issues into her cozy mystery. Now, that's a little more straightforward when you're writing a mystery that's set in a present day, you know,
Hmm.
society. Do you think cozy fantasy it can have immediacy or accessibility because it's dealing with issues, you know, on a small level that we deal with every day?
Yeah.
What do you think about this idea of like larger social issues as well?
Um, I think that it can absolutely be used to address them. I think basically Terry Pratchett did that a lot. And I think Terry Pratchett,
Mm-hmm.
again, Discworld is
Yeah.
something I think, especially as it went on, you could consider cozy fantasy. And he
Yeah.
used fantasy to talk about societal issues and, just kind of broader thoughts about humanity.
Mm-hmm.
And so I absolutely think it can be deployed in that way. Um,
Mm-hmm. Is it something that interests you personally? Where
it'll just kind of depend on the story and the characters at the time.
fair.
For me, a lot of what makes it feel like non-fluff and non-saccharine is just a certain degree of emotional honesty. The people feel real. Like,
Okay.
you know, um, their reactions feel somewhat real. They feel honest. They feel like real people.
Mm-hmm.
And the more they feel like cardboard cutouts, or the more they feel like they have to do a thing just so that you can get a certain outcome, the
Yeah.
more it feels like they're driven by like a twee resolution, the less I believe it. So really, I want to believe in those people. I want to know those people. I want them to feel like real people that might be people that I can interact with. I mean, the real fantasy for me in Legends and Lattes is the idea of finding a bunch of people you get along with in your 40s. Um, that's like, that's escapist fantasy. Um, Finding friends, it's so much harder when you're old, or older, especially if you work in a box like me. Um, you know,
I think that's very true. I also feel like we're getting like a particularly jaded take on on cozy fantasy right now.
well, I don't think it's jaded. I
Maybe
don't think it's
jaded
jaded.
isn't too. Yeah, yeah. I don't mean
Um,
to come after you with that, but
um, maybe jaded about my own life. But that's been my struggle, right? I find it really hard to connect with people as I get older because I'm not in situations where I interact with them. I don't work in an office.
yeah.
When your kids are little and you're a parent, you meet the other parents or the other kids, but that changes pretty quick when everybody's not having a bouncy house party. Um, and so my opportunities to get out in the world and meet people that I'm going to get along with are less and less as time goes by. It takes a special kind of effort to do it, and it's very easy to get overwhelmed by life. So for me, that's a really relatable fantasy because there is nothing better than finding people that you get along with. So um, I don't know if maybe that's jaded. For me, it feels
No.
like it's just acknowledging a truth that I've experienced, which is that this stuff's hard, and it
Yes.
feels
Yeah.
like it shouldn't be.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, no, no. I think you are right. It struck me as funny in the initial moment when you were saying it, but obviously you're right because found family is a huge attraction of any cozy genre. We find it in mystery the same as we find it in fantasy, and it tends to be
Yeah,
people's favorite part of the
yeah,
stories.
yeah. Finding your
So,
people.
yeah. No. Well, yes. So I do get it, and I apologize for calling you jaded.
No apology needed. No apology needed. I'm trying to evaluate whether I'm jaded or not.
No, no, no. I know, I know. Go on a half-hour podcast about your book and end up with questions about your existence. No, no, no.
Self-reflection is always good.
But I think it all speaks to kind of what you've been talking about. What I'm hearing is that you're extremely character-driven, right? Would
Yeah,
you consider
yeah. I
yourself, yeah, a
think,
character-driven author? Yeah.
especially for this kind of story, it feels like character is
Yeah.
the thing they care about most. That every character could be a main character that just doesn't happen to be their story. And I want to. My interactions with other people end up being some of the most rewarding things in my life, and so I want to. When I'm engaging with this kind of fiction, I want to engage with other people connecting to each other and seeing how that works, and appreciating it for what it is and relating uh, to the ways that they navigate a relationship. Those things are all interesting to me. It's
Yeah.
like watching couples therapy.
Fair. Well, and I guess just like one last note on that, because I also find it endlessly fascinating, um, and it can be difficult, right? Because narration, writing, all these things tend to happen, yeah, in a box, as you said. It tends to happen alone. We talk about that a lot with writing. Um, and so it can be really magical when you connect with other folks who are also interested in the same things, who have different views from you, but yes, can meet you kind of on common ground.
Hmm.
For me, that honestly, doing this podcast has been very much that, and it's been extremely magical.
Yeah.
So
That was one
yeah,
of the unexpected benefits of writing is
yeah,
you go to a book signing, you go to an event, and when you're writing a book, you're putting something of your experience into it. And so when somebody else recognizes that experience in their own life and talks to you about it and says, I felt that, I saw that,
yeah.
I experienced that, and I saw it in your book, and I was like, oh my God, somebody else felt the same thing. That's a real powerful element of connection. It's this reaffirmation that we're not alone. And I think that's incredibly amazing, and it's not something that I expected to get out of writing, out of the act of writing and putting a book out. And I'm just endlessly grateful for it because it can't be understated how fabulous it is.
Absolutely. Yeah, well, and it certainly underlines the importance of honesty, right? As you were saying, the emotional honesty, so that people can actually relate to the characters and
Yeah,
then
yeah,
to you.
and that's the experience, right? You don't connect if there wasn't anything honest.
Yeah,
It's
yeah. Yes. All right. Well, coming back around to something that you had said earlier, about not wanting to be in a box as the guy who writes about people who run businesses in a cozy fashion. The upcoming book, right, Brigands and Breadknives, that does kind of raise the stakes a little bit. And obviously, we have a shift to a different character, which I love your point. The side characters can all have their own books, right? Was that kind of so that was like a natural evolution for you, really, as an author?
um, I I don't want to write the same book over and over again.
Yeah.
I want to write about an experience that I understand, and I want every book to be able to stand on its own as its own thing. So, what felt important to write about at the time I was writing Brigands and Breadknives was the the kind of personal struggle of being able to disappoint people that you like. Because if we're honest about what we want or what's important to us, sometimes you're going to disappoint other people. You can't help
Yeah.
it. And as an inveterate people pleaser who's been trying to get better about that, that felt like a really relevant struggle to me. And I know a lot of other people struggle with the same kind of thing. So,
Absolutely.
talking about a different character that basically goes on a journey that is almost the opposite one that Viv goes on in Legends Lattes, that feels interesting to me because it's thematically consistent. We're talking about some of the same things, but also it's acknowledging that, hey, maybe what's right for you is not actually opening a small business in your local town. Maybe that is actually going to fix your life for everybody. And maybe we all, fix what we need to fix in our lives in different ways. Moreover, maybe it doesn't stay fixed. Maybe it only works for a while and then you do something else. And that's okay too. You don't have to stay fixed. You don't have to do something and say, okay, everybody, I got it figured out. Never again will there be an issue. Um,
Yeah. No.
and that's what, and Fern seemed like the character that was most likely to take that journey. And it's also a way for me to let Viv have her happy ending, because while I could try and continue the series by upsetting her apple cart over and over again, I don't really want to do that. I like that she got where she got. I'd like her to be able to enjoy it for a little while. So it's nice to head off in a different direction. And again, I don't want to write within the confines of some genre. I don't want to say, oh, look, here are the rules, I must follow them. And I just want to write whatever story feels relevant. And if it's cozy or if it isn't, ultimately that's up to me. I think what's cozy about it, or ultimately, it has the same perspective on people. It thinks about people the same way. The kind of people that are in it are the same sort of people. And they're contending with whatever's going on in their life with the same sense of basically optimism and hope. And that ultimately people are, for the most part, good and want to be good to others. And we have our failures, but ultimately there's a hopefulness to the perspective that I think can exist no matter what kind of story you're telling. I mean, it's not like there's cozy horror. There's cozy horror, for goodness sake. We can write. We can push it around. So I'm just determined to bend as far as I can bend it.
Nice. No, I'm on board. A fellow author I saw did actually start a Substack called Cozy Horror, so it's coming.
Yep.
For some folks, it's already here.
Yeah, I think someone to build a nest in. John Widwell, I think, is
Yeah,
basically
yeah.
cozy horror.
Right? Yeah, the possibilities are endless. I really appreciate the kind of the theme of acceptance, right? That you're talking about there. Like, if even if you're not, you thought you fixed it, but it comes back around, or something else comes up and it's not fixed, and that's fine. I think that's a
Yeah.
really, really poignant message.
A lot of us, I think, for me, like, do I have the right to be unsettled? Do I have the right? My life is objectively good. Do I have the right to
Yeah.
say this is not working for me and I need to try something else? Am I being ungrateful by, I think these are like interior struggles that a lot of us have, and it's really easy to try to set them aside and ignore these things that eat away at us because we don't feel like we have the right to do it. And I think it's worth thinking about and worth talking about.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, just the idea of like giving yourself permission to the,
Yeah.
that it is okay, you know. Yeah, I think that's very worthwhile. Um, Now, on kind of a more technical side of things, uh, what was it like narrating your own audiobooks?
It's the easiest narration you'll ever do. At least it is for me. Um, One of the things that makes a book easy or challenging to narrate, apart from being edited, is
Mm,
how close you are to being on the same wavelength as the author. You know,
mm,
because a lot of narration is anticipation. You're anticipating where a sentence is going to go, like how the
mhm.
inflection is going to bend. What are the patterns of speech, and how closely do I relate to them so that I can anticipate where this is going? And there's just nobody you can be on a better wavelength with than yourself. The other thing that happens is that, at least for me, after I've narrated a whole lot, my interior voice is really strong, so I write the way I speak, which
Mm,
means it's already going to be easy to speak aloud. It's not going to be weird discursive sentences that are easy to get tangled in because those don't deliver well in audio. So I'm
right.
like predisposed to write the way it would be read,
Hmm.
which really takes out a lot of the heavy lifting.
Yeah, I'd
Plus, I know
imagine
how
so.
everything's pronounced, and I don't have to ask anybody.
Yes. Knowing the pronunciation sounds like a big one. Yeah. Do you find does that mean that you end up kind of editing yourself as you go, like while you're writing or while you're narrating? Like, are you kind of editing at the same time?
So when I write, because I can already hear it basically
Mm,
before I've written it, I think I get to skip kind of a step.
mm,
What I write is pretty close to what I would say from the get-go, and that's a big,
hmm.
for me, advantage,
Yeah.
um, because the edit is not dramatic. Um, that's been my experience anyway.
Nice.
Um,
Yeah.
I So when I actually narrate the book, it's usually I've done it after the copy edit, but before the final text is set. So I use it as a final thing because it doesn't
Mm,
matter. Once you read it out loud, you're going to see that missing comma or that quotation mark that didn't end up where it wanted to be, or
right.
maybe you'll discover a logic error. So I'm in kind of a uniquely nice position that I get to do basically a last edit just to pick up any remaining like editorial droppings. They're usually really minor, it's like two or three things, but
Mm,
almost always something creeps into a final print book these days, and I get to knock a
yeah.
few of them off the list.
Yeah, that's nice. That little added boost of confidence, I would imagine, in
You
the
just,
final
yeah,
project. Yeah.
I've read this all the way through. I'm pretty sure this is what I intended. Cool. Okay, go to print.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and speaking of printing, okay, so you started out self-publishing Legends and Lattes. The book was very successful and was picked up by a traditional publisher. Um, what was that like? Because I feel like that is maybe the dream for a lot of authors. But what
I
was it like to
think it's
actually have that
becoming
happen?
really unexpected, and
Mm,
it was a good experience. And I think it's happening more and more, especially
mm,
because the ability to market a book is more crowd sourced at this point. You know, it's TikTok, it's Book
yeah.
Talk, it's BookTube, it's whatever social media prefix book, uh, social media avenue you've got to work with. Um, and so, especially now that self-publishing kind of has the stink off of it, and there's lots and lots of very
Mm,
successful self-publishing authors, it's not like that's not a valid avenue. In fact, I know way more successful financially self-published authors than I do traditionally published authors.
yeah.
So for that to be like the proving ground for a book, where then a traditional publisher gets to remove a lot of their risk, they don't really have to roll the dice. This is already going to be successful. We can see it's already proved itself out. We'll just make it available to audiences that wouldn't otherwise get it. That's a pretty good bet, and I think it's happening a lot more. Olivia
Mm,
Blake, Diablo 6, Senlin Ascends went that direction. Rage of Dragons was that kind of book. That I think it
mm-hmm.
happens a lot. Um, and then now you get really hybrid versions like what Matt Denneman's doing. So Dungeon Crawler Carl is in print only traditionally, and everything else is indie. So you've got a weird hybrid
Right.
setup.
Yeah.
For this, I got approached by agents. I had never thought of taking it trad. I wouldn't have considered doing it, and I certainly wouldn't have gone and done it myself. But after 3 agents contacted me, I thought, well, why not? I'll just see how it goes. And then when Tor made a preempt offer, I was like, well, I love Tor. I have a unique opportunity to try this both ways and to see what the experience is like. And I had some concerns, but largely they were not concerns that bore out. So I've been really happy with the experience. It means that the book ended up in the hands of a lot of people that wouldn't have otherwise. It's been translated into 20-something languages at this point. I never would have done that. So these are all things that would never have happened, and I'm very grateful. I love my editor. I think I probably had an unusually good experience because, again, I got to come into it from a point of already being successful. I'm sure there are people who have unpleasant experiences with traditional publishing, but mine's been charmed, and I'm grateful for it. But I can also acknowledge that it's probably a little charmed.
There's nothing wrong with that, you know. But out of curiosity, why wouldn't you have gone traditional? Just
Well, I
to
wasn't looking
begin
to
with.
leave my job, you know. It would have been. It was already doing just fine it was doing just great on self-pub. I could have happily earned money having it published on self-pub. I'd already done the audiobook. And I had plenty of audiobooks to record, you know. It's still my job, really. I'm juggling 2 jobs now. It just wasn't, I wasn't looking to make the jump. Gosh, if I could just become a full-time author. That just wasn't something that I was aiming for. So I just didn't think of it. And the idea of putting it out on submission and waiting a year to see if somebody might like it didn't sound appealing to me.
Fair, yeah.
And if I could go back in time, I would still do it the same way. I would self-pub first and retain all my rights and kind of roll the dice every time. And if the book failed, oh well. But if it did great, then maybe I would consider, maybe I want to agent this now. It already has proven itself out, and I can kind of shortcut that process. I don't know, but that's my sense of what I would do if I could go back in time with all my current knowledge.
It seems very reasonable to me to be, especially having had, you know, the fact that you did have a very good experience. It's neat to see things work out. You know what I mean? Like,
it is. It's really rewarding and always unexpected. But if they don't, I'd like to find out soon. You know, I want to fail fast.
Yeah.
Again.
Yeah,
I hear lots of stories about people who spend a long time working on a novel, and then it goes out to agents, and then it sits in. And for me, I feel like my personality, I wouldn't do anything else while I waited. I would be so hung up on the thing that I'd already done, it would be very hard for me to move on. So I like the ability to just do it, and it's going to work or it's not, but I find out pretty quick. And then I can set it aside or go all in on it rather than wait.
Yeah, having control of your own schedule is definitely a blessing and a curse sometimes, but but yeah.
You overschedule yourself like I do. Yes, it can definitely be.
Oh
a
my
curse.
God. Yes, I absolutely. Yeah, no. Anyway. All right. But kind of on that note, to be fair, you have what seems to me to be like a really strong track record of helping other authors and connecting with people in the writing world. I put it in my notes. Sure, you don't remember, but like way back when, this would have been 2022, probably 2021. I had emailed you as like a little fledgling author being like, oh my God, I love your formatting of all things. And you replied, and we had a conversation about like vellum and formatting books.
Oh, good.
No. It was a very positive experience for me. And, you know, poking around doing the research for this podcast, like I could see like you have like a pretty comprehensive guide about publishing up on your website. Is this something that is important to you?
It is.
Yeah.
I like the idea if you figure something out, you give other people a leg up. When I want people to do it for me, I want to do it for other people. We're all kind of in it together. rising tide lifts all boats and all those other cliches. But in general, I think I like making information that I have gathered available to other people if I can, in a concise way. Because why not? It just means you're going to hopefully get more stuff. More people figuring things out, more people making things that they care about is good. So anything you can do to facilitate it is good. And again, the connections with people are like the best part of this. So I don't ever want to be the person that ignores an email or ignores a message. There's a volume beyond which it gets challenging, but I still don't ever want to ignore it. Because you just never know. It's amazing what small gestures or small conversations can like be the start of the snowball for somebody else. And I don't know, it just feels like it's the least you can do.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, and I think I mean, it fits very well, obviously, right, with the whole like cozy and community, and it just kind of underlines what we were talking about with the books. But that's something that I think about too when I'm writing, or when I'm looking at a book I've written, being like, was it any good? There's so many ways you can measure that, but one of them is, I think, unknowable in a very hopeful way, because it's true. You never know what is going to really connect with somebody.
Nope. And honestly, if you write something in one person, it makes some kind of difference for them. It adds something to their life. It changes something for them in a positive way. That's a win.
Absolutely.
And you aren't going to know most of them. They're messages in a bottle. You're just going to occasionally get an inkling of maybe how it's affected others, and it's still worth doing.
100% agreed. Yes. Even with all the overscheduling, all the messing with timelines, editing, all that stuff. Yes.
Yeah.
On that note, what advice would you give to yourself when you were just starting out? We talked about you would probably do it kind of the same way. Is there anything else you would say to yourself?
That the simple idea, it can be a good idea. That it doesn't have to be complicated to be worth your time. And I think it's really easy to fall into the trap of like the idea needs to be the biggest thing ever, and I got to come up with all of these twists, and there have to be all of these. I have to conceptualize all of these reasons for this to exist. But a simple thing can have great value as long as it's honest and you do the best job you can on it. So I think that's what I would tell little me. It certainly would have saved me some trouble earlier on for the kinds of books I attempted to write but wasn't ready to write. But there's just nothing wrong with doing something simple.
Right. Well, and the simplicity becomes a strength, right? Like, that's kind of the point. Yeah, it's the point. We touched on it at the beginning, and I've seen you make it elsewhere. But certainly helped with Legends and Lattes, because not that the book is simple, but like being able to recognize the simplicity of the core idea really helps with then marketing and then creating a touchstone that people recognize. Yeah,
because in a lot of ways your book is your marketing, and nobody's idea feels great the whole way through. Halfway through, everything feels like trash. It's old, it's dumb, it's lame. I can't believe I've spent so much time on this. This won't matter to anyone. It always does. So you're never going to satisfy yourself that the idea is good enough or big enough or amazing enough, because it just isn't. It can't be for you. You spent too much time looking at it from 2 inches away. So if you can set aside that fear, and I think that goes a long way to making it more achievable to finish a book, and to finish a book that means something to you.
Absolutely. Okay, final question. I ask this of everybody. What is one win you've had in the past week, big or small? Be anything.
I went and bought new clothes, and most of them still fit. I went to the wash, and I don't regret it.
Lovely. A very appropriately cozy win. Well, thank you very much for being here.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
No problem at all. I will have all of your links and everything will be in the show notes, so listeners
Okay.
can find you there. Once again, thank you so much. This has been amazing. And for listeners, I will talk to you next time. Cozy Alchemy is brought to you by Authors on the Air, and our theme music is by Cyberwave Orchestra. For everything else, blame Elle. You can find her online at ellehartford.com.